Thank you for joining Dali Wireless today. I'm Wendy Hart, the Marketing Manager at Dali Wireless, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today we have Rick Holland, Director of Enterprise Solutions at Dali Wireless. As the Director of Enterprise Solutions at Dali Wireless, he works with enterprises across all verticals to support their cellular, public safety, and Wi-Fi requirements. Prior to joining Dali Wireless, Rick was Senior Director of Verizon Wireless South Area at TE Connectivity. Rick also served as the VP of Business Development in the Eastern U.S. region at Externet System Corporation for 10 years. And he also served as the VP of Business Development of the Wireless Service Provider Solutions at Flextronics. During today's webinar, we'll be going through the steps to deploy and implement an in-building wireless system to support your cellular, public safety, and Wi-Fi requirements. As a gentle reminder, you might type in your questions in the chat panel at any time during the session, and we'll answer them at the end. Also, playback of the presentation will be available on the Dali Wireless website, and you'll also receive information in a follow-up email. Okay, we'll get started. I'll pass the mic over to Rick.
Hi everyone, how are you today? I know you can't answer me, but it's always polite to start that way. Listen, I know that it's morning in some places. It's afternoon in other places. Thank you for joining us today. I noticed in the participant list that there are a significant number of value-added resellers, system integrators that are joining this, as well as individuals within the IT section of hospitality, and even a few from the hospitals, the healthcare industry. Do forgive me, I'm talking really more now to the systems integrators that are very familiar with DAS as a concept and the implementation aspects, but I'm on several of the technical areas. I'm going to be speaking very generically and also in using quite a few analogies in order to get the point across to everyone more in layman terms. So with that, on our screen, we're seeing the Dali Wireless. The next one is really just a summation of who we are. We have over 200 patents from a global perspective. Most of those are directed toward digital platforms, specifically within distributed antenna systems. Our products support all the North American, Latin American, Asia Pacific, and EU commercial and public safety frequencies. So therefore, we're supporting a tremendous amount of frequency bands, modulations, and we're also vendor agnostic. And what that means is basically it doesn't matter if the RF for the DAS networks, which we'll describe a little later, is an Ericsson solution, a Nokia solution. It's irrelevant to our product, as we're totally agnostic to that. So first, before we really go into it, we're just going to touch a little on why the need. You know, why do we need the in-building wireless networks? And I think you probably all know why, but in effect, over the last several years, we've finally gotten to a point that over 80% of all cellular traffic is occurring from indoors. And the challenge, though, continues to be getting a very good signal indoor. Not so much for voice, but certainly for data applications, email, text messages, video, streaming video, researching on the internet, Google, all the applications. They all require high-speed data. And your customers, especially those in the hospitality field and the healthcare field, they expect that their phones are going to be working indoors. From a hospital perspective, from a hospitality perspective, you may be sponsoring a national sales meeting of some organization next week. And if you have 300, 400 attendees that are meeting in some of your conference rooms and they cannot get a good signal in order to facilitate their data needs, then you're probably not going to have that same customer the following year. So again, it's reached a point that it is an expectation that all of this will be provided. Our industry has reached a point that wireless, or in-building wireless now, is being viewed as the fourth utility. You've got electric, you've got power, and so forth, and then DAS now is looked at as a utility in itself. From this perspective, the wireless carriers have made investments into many, many markets. Most of those markets, the investments that they've made have been at the very top tier. You'll have distributed antenna systems, for example, that were funded by or funded in part by the T-Mobiles, the Verizons, the Sprints, the AT&Ts. Those are college football stadiums that seat 90,000 people on a given Saturday or more. They're university campuses that have a tremendous amount of people that are trying to use their products at the same time. You also have convention centers, railways, airports. So this was the first tier of DAS, and this has transpired really over the last 8 years. Each year it became a little more and a little more active. It's now reached a point that the majority of these bigger applications are covered. Now the wireless carriers sit back and they see that in order for them to be involved in building out the remainder of the hospitals, the hotels and resorts, etc., that they would have to make a significant investment, and frankly, they're at a point that they can't do that anymore. And the view of them being a utility, which I respect myself, is that if you think about it, if you have a 20-story hotel and that you're building and you need electrical power, you're going to get in touch with the power company and they will provide your power to the panel outside your building. It's your responsibility as the venue to bring that power and distribute it in to your buildings. Same holds true with water. The water utility will bring the water to the facility, but again, it's the facilities or the venue's responsibility to get it inward. So that's really where we are. The T-Mobiles, the AT&Ts, the Verizons, the Sprints are seeing themselves as a utility. They can bring and are expected to bring the signal to your venue, but getting that signal distributed through the venue is the responsibility of the venue itself. Now, what is a DAS? In effect, a DAS system is simply a system that has been installed inside and potentially outside a given area that will take a wireless signal from a T-Mobile, an AT&T, a Sprint, a Verizon, and distribute that signal evenly through a building or an outdoor area. As you're seeing on the screen here, this is representative, obviously, of a hotel building. You have an outbuilding to the side of it, which can also be covered. You have the swimming pool areas, which can be covered. And also, even though not depicted, you can have the parking areas that are also covered. You'll see in the bottom of the represented hotel itself a base station. And the base station is what is supplied by one of the wireless carriers, or all of the wireless carriers. Each can have their own. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-blown base station. It could be an off-air repeater that works off of the roof. So you're pulling a signal from Verizon, hypothetically, from a tower that's very close by into the building, and then it goes into the DAS and is distributed across all the areas that it needs to be in order to get the perfect coverage. There's really a couple of types of DAS systems. You have passive DAS and active DAS. A passive DAS system is one that is really more practical for buildings in the 5 to 50,000 square foot area, maybe even 100,000 square feet or more, if the challenge area is somewhat wide open. In a passive network, you're really relying a lot on the use of coax cable, and coax cable is susceptible to a large amount of loss of the RF signal if you're traveling any distance whatsoever. So your passive DAS networks are not really practical in terms of being able to provide the data capabilities that the consumers are really looking for. You can install a passive DAS system within a 20,000 or 100,000 square foot or a 1,000,000 square foot facility, but all it's really going to be doing is providing you better voice coverage. It'll give you 3 bars, 4 bars, 5 bars. But as far as the speed for the data, it's not really practical. For those, you go into more of an active DAS system. And in the active DAS, you can have 2 types. They're either going to be analog over fiber, and the analog is the RF signal itself that goes over a fiber strand, which is routed through the buildings on each one of the floors in all of the areas where you need that coverage and capacity. The only real issue, analog is a good system. The only real issue you have with it is that the noise figures will increase the longer that fiber run is. So if you're coming out of the basement and you're coming onto the first floor and you're running all across the ceiling area of the first floor, then you go to the second, then you go to the third and fourth and fifth. The longer that fiber run is, the more noise that will be incorporated into the signal, and therefore your signal, it'll still work, but the overall quality is not as good as if you have a pure digital platform. And this is what Dolly is providing. Our digital platform runs over fiber, and there is no signal degradation over long distances. The fact that it's digital also allows somewhat of a future-proofing of the network itself. And the reason that we say somewhat future-proof is that currently we've been running for years 2G, and then we went to 3G. We're currently doing 4G, which is your LTEs, and very soon we'll be doing 5G. On an analog system, typically, once that new technology of a 5G is deployed, there are several times or several scenarios in which you may have to do somewhat of a rip and replace of existing equipment and replace it with new. Whereas if you're running off of a digital type of a format, such as Dolly, then again, typically your upgrades are going to be software upgrades that are done through the system itself. In addition, unlike an analog system with a, am I still on? Oh, I had a call waiting, I apologize. In addition to an RF system, a digital platform is, such as the Dolly, is going to provide you with the opportunity for anything that is IP-based related. Security cameras, additional Wi-Fi access points, electronic billboards. These types of appliances can be plugged into the existing DAS network and help to support additional applications. Most hotels of any size usually already have a Wi-Fi network installed. That's great. However, when we install a Dolly network on a digital platform, if you have any areas within your Wi-Fi coverage that are not quite as strong as they should be, then it's conceivable that you can plug into one of our existing nodes, as we call them, and pull out an extra Wi-Fi point to increase that overall coverage in that area that's a little bit challenged. So there's many reasons why DAS is more effective, digital DAS is more effective than analog, and some of those things that we'll speak about as we go further into this. So from a step-to-step guide, if you will, perspective, what we are doing is providing a turnkey solution. Our goal is that you do not have to find an outside company, for example, that can design a DAS network that works for you. You don't have to go out and solicit bids from systems integrators that can come in and install the system for you. You don't have to deal at the outset with the wireless service providers for retransmission agreements, which we'll get into shortly, because all of this is done through the Dolly process. We are a turnkey provider. So in step one, what we're going to do is come into your facility and do a walkthrough. We will walk your entire building. We'll take existing signal levels that are coming in from the wireless carriers. It'll also show you where you have some challenges in your existing Wi-Fi. And we'll sit down with you to make a determination of what your real coverage needs are. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. There is a perception that, again, let's say you have a 20-story hotel that is 500,000 square feet. Just because you have 500,000 square feet of property doesn't necessarily mean you need all of that coverage 100% of the time. For example, most hotels, the first thing that they want to look at is going to be the common areas. So as a guest comes into the lower floors, into the lobby area, they need good coverage. You need good coverage and capacity in the bars, in the restaurants, in the meeting rooms, in the conference rooms. And you may want to bring that coverage upward into the towers, into the hallways of the rooms. But you don't necessarily go into each room. So we do a very detailed assessment of what you're looking for and what is going to be best for you. Do you need all of the wireless service providers on your system, on the system? Do you need public safety, the first responder? The Dolly system is compatible with public safety as well. That in itself is a different challenge that we can speak with or speak toward as we're meeting with you. So in effect, that's what we're doing. So, and really part of step one, it's really step one and step two are combined together. We're going to be doing the site survey, and in addition to that, we'll come back and we'll perform an IB wave design. That's the picture that you're seeing over here that's showing your signal strength on any given area of your property, whether it be a hospital or a hotel. And we're providing that in an IB wave design. We'll come up with a bill of materials of what's going to be needed. And this is on existing buildings now. But if you do have new buildings that are in your budget to be built in the coming years, it's always best to incorporate all of your design work for a needed DAS network into the original design, your pre-building plans, and etc. So this is simply another way of helping you save additional money moving forward. We will also then provide you with within the bill of materials, this is going to be listing all of your equipment, all of the passive components that would be required, whether it's lateral cables, antennas, so forth. It'll incorporate what the installation cost is going to be, the optimization cost, and the total cost. At that point, we can also start to bring in financing options. We'll talk more about that in the next few slides. But now we get to a point that you as a company would need to start to make a decision. If it sounds like something that might work for you, then Dolly will go to the wireless service providers in your area, a T-Mobile, an AT&T, or Verizon, as an example, and we would provide them our designs. This is what we did back here, and show them how our designs meet their design requirements, because they do have very strict design requirements. And get them comfortable that the system that has been designed is something that's going to be good for them. If it includes public safety, then that design and that BOM would be in there as well. What we're looking for from the wireless carrier is a commitment that they are willing to provide an RF source. Now, depending on your property, depending on your overall capacity needs, that may mean a full-blown base station with several sectors. Or it could mean that they will supply what's called an off-air repeater. I talked about that earlier. That's where, let's say, Verizon has a tower a mile away, and they feel that they can pull their signal from that tower and distribute it through there. As long as you can get the commitment that they're going to come onto your network, that's the objective. Now, there will be cases, hopefully few and far between, that a carrier says, look, we just cannot afford that investment, the investment of a base station or even an off-air repeater. And when those situations arise, then we will come back to you and show you what the additional cost would be for you to install that equipment yourself. But at the end of the day, the goal is to get you in a position where you own this network. It's yours. You're paying for it hook, line, and sinker. and we'll handle, again, all of the coordination aspects to make sure that happens. Now, let's assume then that everything works out with the carriers, and we have commitments from the carriers that once the system is implemented, then they will supply their equipment so that they can join the network. Remembering too, is this is showing that if we can get involved in new buildings, it's much easier, it's much less expensive. But we do have a plan in place with a very good financial and leasing company based out of Utah that has over $3.5 billion in existing business spread across the country, and they are experts in telecommunications, financing, hospitality, and healthcare. They offer some very, very flexible programs, and let me explain what we mean by that. Your company, from a capital perspective, could be very, very capital rich. And you may say, well, we really don't need to even consider the financing. Well, that's fine. However, it's not so much the CapEx contribution as much as it is the CapEx contribution within a particular budget cycle. Okay? If you only have one venue that you need coverage and you have the capital up front for that venue, that's great. You may, though, be part of a chain of hospitality properties. And our finance companies can work with you to make a determination of how many of your facilities, they may stage this over 5-6 years, you need to have operational quickly. Based on this, they can provide you a line of credit so that you do not overspend on your budget for any given calendar year moving forward. As your new budgets come into play in following years, then you've got the ability to come back into them and refinance each one on an individual basis if that's the way that you want to run them. You can contribute more capital to buy down on the overall OPEX side. They will work with you on any type of a bridge financing, operating leases, capital leases, and lease lines of credits, which is really what we were talking about here. This simply gives you the ability to be able to bring more properties online quicker. And our next step, step 5, is going to be the system installation, the integration of the RF, and the commissioning. In other words, the fine-tuning of the system. So based on an RF design, we will install all the cables, and assuming you can see my mouse, the cables will run from the basement area all the way to the roof. You'll have GPS antennas on top of the roof. These cables might run across individual floors and into other areas, but all of the installation of the fiber and the cables will be performed. We'll install all of the passive equipment, which again, your passive equipment are going to be ancillary cables beyond the backbone cable requirement. Could be some Wi-Fi access points, could be antennas, could be security cameras, and even outdoor applications where you may need coverage around your swimming pool areas or in the parking areas. So all of this is taken care of. We'll verify all the fiber and the cable and the capacitive components are operating correctly. Then we will actually install the system itself, and that is the host, which is located typically down in the basement areas. And also we'll bring in the RF equipment from the wireless service providers, whether it's T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, whoever. We'll then install this, verify that the system is operating per the design. We'll also verify that the system meets AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile's requirements for the system. And then after that, we typically will have the carrier come into the building himself or themselves, and they'll do their own walk test just to make sure that everything is working well. And we'll do final measurements, may do some tweaking in order that everything is optimum. And then the final part is actually an agreement, and that agreement is going to be between your facility, because you own the building and you own the network. It will be between you and the mobile operator, and it's called a retransmission agreement. And in effect, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, what you're doing is taking their RF signal and distributing it or retransmitting it through your building. So you are simply guaranteeing them that your network was designed properly, it is operating properly at all times, and if there are problems that develop, there's a path of resolution as to how you get those taken care of. And again, Dolly can help and will help with all of those. Now, another aspect of importance is system monitoring, maintenance, and repair. And we would encourage you to consider these as aftermarket solutions. You need a network operations center that can monitor the system remotely and identify any problems that the system has. It's electronic. It will have problems from time to time. It's always the best case if you can verify this in advance, so you don't have customer complaints, obviously, and get those problems corrected as quickly as possible. We utilize, or will be utilizing, our own system integrator partners. We won't have a lot of them, but we will have them geographically distributed across the country, and these are system integrators that can provide a turnkey solution, including network operations center capabilities. They'll also be able to provide you with levels of escalation in terms of how quickly they'll be out and so forth and so on. So we would be more than happy to help you in this area as well. So really what it's coming down to is that if you were to try to take on the responsibility yourselves of implementing a DAS network, then you're going to have to do a lot of work. You have to source and secure a reputable company to put together the design that's going to meet your needs. You've got to find a reputable company to install the system, including low voltage cable pullers. You have to negotiate with the wireless service providers to gain authorization for your retransmission of their frequencies. And then you're going to need to find reputable companies to perform your maintenance, monitoring, and repair. And what we do here at Dolly is provide that turnkey package, including financing options, that can handle all of this for you. So, in a nutshell, if you will, we're offering a turnkey and potentially unified solution. We're going to be able to provide you with fewer drop calls, extreme fast internet connections, anywhere, anytime. We can also tie the DAS network into the public safety and also tie into Wi-Fi itself. And again, both of those are worthy of standalone meetings to discuss them and explain exactly how they do work. Being a digital platform, we're supporting all of the existing technologies, 2G all the way up through 4G, and even the coming technologies of 5G. Not as a rip and replace, where we have to pull out some equipment that we installed a year ago and sell you more. This is a software upgrade. Our network will support public safety, and it supports most of the changes without actual disruption to your network. So obviously, from a hotel perspective, you're providing that world-class guest service. You're enhancing your brand. You're generating more revenue. You're keeping your customers happy. You can tie this in with GPS-type programs where you can send your guests, your hotel guests, updates on activities and things that are going on in and around your property. The fact that you can unify several of the technologies, again, whether it's your DAS, Wi-Fi, and public safety, you're maximizing a lot of your investments and streamlining operations. And then also you're able to keep pace with the rapidly changing industry. Finally, in summary, again, some of this is somewhat redundant, but we provide a needs assessment, and we'll do all of the requirements gathering. We'll perform a site survey and an RF design. We'll provide the proposals. And once you have deemed that proposal to be within plus or minus 15%, we'll go to the wireless carriers and make sure that they're willing to support the network in itself. Not with a capital investment, but simply supplying the RF. They're the utility company. So we're looking for that utility company to bring their RF to your building so that you can distribute it through that building. We offer the financing options, system installation, integration and commissioning, system monitoring and maintenance, and obviously the system itself comes with warranties. And again, this is a little redundant, but the digital platform provides quite a bit towards future proofing, if you will. The combination of the digital signal and the fiber allows you to go further across your facility with a consistent, ubiquitous signal without a lot of degradation. It optimizes the user experience, especially in terms of their data throughput, and minimizes their noise interference. And it's a very flexible deployment, and it can accommodate all types of expansion without downtime. If you need to add additional wireless carriers in the future, you can do so, and those can be added incrementally without a lot of disruption or downtime. And again, it not only supports cellular, but also Wi-Fi over the same system. With our solution, you're able to keep your customers happy. You're able to provide the wireless coverage area and capacity at any time, whether it's through the hotel rooms, the lobby, the convention center, the meeting rooms. We're able to provide you support for all of the mobile operators, depending on which ones you want or which ones that you need in terms of a T-Mobile, an AT&T, a Verizon, or even a Sprint. We're offering the maximization of your investment. We offer providing support for public services and utilities. Now, this is really a summation of 5 errors to avoid when you're implementing and in building DAS systems. Don't think only about your needs today. This is part of our initial meeting. We'll sit down and talk with what your needs are today, where 5G is coming forward, what you may need in the future. Be sure to plan for public safety coverage, even though you may not have to deploy it initially. There could very well be federal mandates coming down that indicate you have to provide this coverage at some later point in time. It would be in your best interest to be able to have your network designed on a digital platform that that also allows for you to tap right in. Again, for new building planning, it's always the best idea to plan for that up front in your preliminary RF designs, because it is going to save you an extensive amount of money. And we always want to engage with the mobile operators early on in the process. One of the biggest issues that you could have would be walking into this, you pay for a system that you think work, you go out to the wireless carriers and they say, geez, I'm sorry, but we cannot provide this cost to you. So then you've got more costs that you didn't know about up front. And that ties in really with number 5. Do not assume that the wireless operators are going to pay for the system, because it's just not going to happen. That time has passed. And our industry, especially in terms of commercial, enterprise, hospitality, even healthcare, the wireless carriers just can't afford to make those investments in areas that they can't recoup that investment. And that's where we are today. So that in itself, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. It looks like I've taken about 45 minutes. So we would be open to some questions. Wendy, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Rick. That was very informative. Like you said, we'll go into Q&A now. We actually have also invited Gary Cellular to join as a panelist. He's our Senior Director of Technical Sales. We received a couple of questions, so I'll get that started. First question, what is the typical dollar per square footage for a implementation of an in-building wireless system?
Well, it's just like anything else. It depends. What we're targeting for that is if we're dealing with buildings, multi-story, that were constructed from at least 1985 to the current day. So we know that those buildings were using modern architectural design criteria, then we think that we can probably have a system that would be installed within your facility that would provide coverage out of the box to a T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, just as example. We're hoping for that to be in somewhere between $1.20, $1.30 a square foot.
Okay.
There will be instances now. For example, there's a property that we are currently evaluating in Manhattan, and this particular property was built back in 1928. All bets are off on those types of applications where we know that we're going to run into significant issues in terms of change orders and unexpected construction problems.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Another question. Can public safety and cellular be on the same system?
Technically, yes, they can. When we run our fiber backbone and the associated laterals that come off of the backbone in order to support the commercial node equipment, we can support the public safety commitment on that same backbone. So again, theoretically, yes, we can do that. The question, though, is federal government. What they are finally going to mandate moving forward into the future. They may very well allow that to be in buildings that are within X to Y square feet. Or if we're dealing with like the World Trade Center, they're probably going to be mandating that the public safety networks are split away entirely from the commercial network. So they are a dual layer network, if you will.
Okay. Thank you.
Wendy,
yes.
Wendy, this is Gary. Let me just add a little bit to that. The DALI system can be installed combining public safety and commercial on one system, but we generally don't recommend it. And the reason is that Rick has done a very good job of explaining in a commercial system where you're looking at throughput, where you're at times varying your coverage requirements depending on where you are in the building. Public safety is designed for 100% coverage throughout a building, including wheel wells or stairwells, just about every place in the building. And when we design a public safety system, we actually design it to different criteria than we do a commercial system. So you can do the entire system as one. We really recommend that you keep them separate. You need to look at redundancy in public safety. You need to look at survivability in public safety. And all of those things are different than you typically look at when you're designing a commercial system.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary. I have another question. If I use a repeater instead of a base station, the up and down frequencies are different. So is it possible to use the same DALI equipment in this case for both the BTS, base station, and a repeater?
Gary?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Rick. Yeah, absolutely. We don't care, okay? We do public safety systems where you've got simplex frequencies, commercial systems. The repeater has, different transmit, different receive. That doesn't matter to us at all. We can actually combine repeaters and base stations on one system. In fact, we have a system that is fed simultaneously 3 different operators from a base station, an off-air repeater, and a small cell. So it doesn't matter to us what the feed is. We can accommodate that. And then for those of you that are interested in APCO, we're actually going to be announcing a new product at APCO. It's still about a month and a half away, but that's one thing we'll be doing, and it will simplify this entire process even further.
Thank you, Gary. Another question. What is the estimated cost per square foot to implement a DAS system in a building as it's being built versus for an existing building?
That's a really good question. You've got 3 buckets that are going to compromise or that are going to make up, if you will, a BOM, a bill of material. You've got the equipment itself. You've got the ancillary equipment, the antennas and so forth and so forth. And then you have the construction, implementation, and optimization. It's really in that 3rd bucket, the construction aspects, where it's going to save you a considerable amount of money on a per square foot basis. And that savings could be anywhere from 10 cents to maybe as much as 20 cents a square foot of savings. So instead of looking at $1.20, you may be looking at less than or equal to $1 a square foot.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick. Another question. Isn't 5G going to be on a different spectrum? And if so, how can you plan for such?
Gary?
That's a great question. first of all, 5G is still being developed right now. And some of the things that are going on with 5G at this point are very theoretical. 5G is not ready for prime time, irrespective of what you're hearing about. The trials are very rudimentary. So when we look at the system we have right now, what we do is in matrix, it's modular. So if I put in a completely different frequency band, and the one that everybody's talking about is millimeter wave, it's microwave, it will change a lot of things. But because the RF portion of our system is modular, we could actually accommodate new bands. There are some other things that come into play, so you have to be cautious about that. And then as we move forward, what we're going to see probably within the next 2 years, 3 years, frequency agile remotes that will be able to essentially change the spectrum that they're using from any specific radiating point. So that's how we think it's evolving, and that's how we believe we can accommodate it.
Thanks, Gary. Another question. If voice over Wi-Fi usage increases, do you see this replacing DAS, or do you see the two systems working together in the future?
Rick, you want me to take that? Yeah, okay.
Please, yes.
It's, first of all, and I'll show my bias here and I'll state it up front. I think Wi-Fi is really good as a secondary contention system. I do not think Wi-Fi will ever be as good as the licensed cellular systems. It's by its very nature, it's a free system. Most of you that have been involved in the municipal Wi-Fi systems, they've nearly all been turned off simply because as they became popular, the system became overburdened and it wasn't functioning anymore. And if you want to see this work, just have your kids and their friends come over and start using your local network, and you'll see how long the downloads start to take compared to normal. So I think Wi-Fi, particularly voice over Wi-Fi, is not really going to be particularly popular. I think voice over LTE is going to become the digital standard. And a voice over LTE is, again, it's a digital system, but with the quality you expect from a commercial system. And I really think that that's going to become the digital standard. And I do believe that, particularly with the evolution of 5G, that everything in the network will be digital, including voice. But it will be voice over LTE. It won't be voice over Wi-Fi, voice over IP. And then the last point about that, I'm not dismissing Wi-Fi at all, because as the network evolves and we start to see more and more integration of Wi-Fi in commercial bands, unlicensed LTE, LTE Wi-Fi aggregation, all of those technologies, you'll see more and more a closer integration of the Wi-Fi networks with the commercial licensed spectrum to give the users the best possible experience.
Thank you, Gary. That was very informative. Another question. What are your thoughts of DAS versus small cells? For example, hospitals and hotels, why can't we go for a small B, which are backhauled to Ethernet?
I think that's actually a two-parter. Gary can address the technical aspects of it, other than typically with a small cell, that small cell is going to be able to accommodate a single wireless service provider. Maybe it's providing 700 megahertz and 2100 megahertz to a particular wireless carrier. If another carrier needs to come in, it requires additional equipment for that carrier, and a third carrier comes in. So by the time you add all of the equipment that would be required to support all the carriers, your system would be either, now I realize that small cell is less money per unit, but by the time you aggregate all of the carriers into a network, worst case it's going to be about the same price, but your installation services and the overall appearance of the network is going to be much better with a DAS network that a single antenna in the ceiling is going to be supporting T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, all off of a single unit and a single antenna system. Gary, I'm sure there's other technical issues that may come into play there.
Yeah, just from my viewpoint, first of all, my favorite question when I'm asked anything about small cells is to say, what's a small cell? The definition varies all over the place. What was just described in the question is, to me, a femtocell. It is a base station that is fed back through some kind of overlay network using IP. And we can actually transport that information over our system. If you look at some of the ALU metro cells where they're fed via IP, we can transport those on our system, so we can integrate them into the system. But a small cell is not used separately from a DAS system. It's used in conjunction with the DAS system, and my own feeling is that if we look at this going forward, more and more the commercial operators are going to demand full capacity small cells. And this is just software, okay? Somebody will do this, and once that's done, then you're going to use a DAS system to make sure you can deliver that signal from the small cell to the network. So the small cell will feed the network. They'll operate together within the network. And then if we look forward another few years, what we're really going to see is more and more the idea of software-defined radio, where the DAS becomes a distributed RF system, and within that distributed RF system, we have frequency agile radios that can do just about anything. And I think the small cell, as it's defined today, or tends to be defined today, has a limited shelf life. And it's a pretty bold statement, but I really think that's true. I think we're evolving to something that's a little different than what we call a small cell today.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Rick. Last question, since we're running out of time. Do you anticipate using channel sales such as VARs or distributors, or will all your sales be direct?
No,
can I take that one?
You sure can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and Rick was going to say the same thing I was very, very quickly. When we say that Dali is going to provide an integrated solution, unified solution, the reason that we're doing this is not because, you know, we thought of this one day. It's because customers have asked for this. We've seen a lot of enterprise customers that literally want somebody to take over responsibility for putting in the DAS system, and we will absolutely be working through resellers and VARs in partnership with them. So Dali is primarily an equipment manufacturer, and we'll work through certified VARs and resellers to deliver this total package.
Thanks, Gary.
And I would I'd also encourage, Wendy, I'm sorry, I'd also encourage, I'm not sure that my contact information was given out on this webinar or not, but please, of you VARs and resellers that are out there, system integrators that feel that you'd like to explore this further, do give me a call or shoot me an email, and let's make a time that we can sit down and talk.
Thanks, Rick. Since we've reached the hour, we have received a lot of questions. So for any of the unanswered questions, we'll reach out privately with an answer. And as Rick mentioned, we'll be sending up a follow-up email with the webinar recording and also Rick's contact information as well. So you can reach out to him directly if you have any further questions or comments. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today, and have a great afternoon or morning wherever you are. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.